Hi everybody, Mike Pfeiffer with Pfeiffer Hobby Supply here again. I'm going to do another how-to video. It's been, there again, a long time. I don't know where time goes, but anyway, it slipped away from me, and I'm trying to get back in the swing of the how-tos. Anyway, I have one here from a good friend of mine. His name is Glenn Williams. He actually doesn't live too far from here. He lives up in Los Lunas. Anyway, Glenn, let's get to it. It says, two for your how-to. Could we do a simple how to wire a DCC layout, please? And then he says there's plenty of videos out there on DCC decoders into a locomotive, but not much at all, if any, on wiring track to your layout. Maybe in addition you could do a programming track. We've done one on a programming track, Glenn, but I'm going to cover it real briefly again in this video so I can accommodate everything that you asked here. I appreciate you sending this, Glenn, and let's go inside and get on this thing. Okay, guys, we're going to start this out by, I'm just going to tell you a couple of things that are things in my opinion, and everything on this video is going to be basically my opinion. I did research a few things that I didn't have specific answers for. But I just have ways that I have done everything, and I'll tell you what they are, and you can take the information that I'm going to give you and run with it. First of all, I have a lot of guys that are building a brand new layout, and they want to know what do I need to do for DCC wiring. Honestly, if a layout is wired, if you know how to wire a layout for DC. You can wire a layout for DC, then later on convert it to DCC very, very easily. If you initially wire it for DCC, that's not a problem either. Because basically when you're on DC, all you do is take all of that wiring and bring it together to one point and feed all of those individual blocks that you already had with that DCC signal. That's kind of the gist of it. If you're building a layout brand new and you want to start out with DCC, I recommend a bus line around the layout and feeders down from that because that's all you're going to need. You're not really going to need to, you can break it up into blocks. I would recommend breaking up the layout into blocks so that if you have an issue or a short circuit somewhere, you'll have an idea of possibly where to look if you make it where you can lift those individual block wires off to find out what's going on, if it's not something evident. So let's get into this a little more. I have some information here I'll show you. Okay, guys, here's a diagram that I kind of stole off the internet. I think it's Brian someone's shop, and it's in the UK. Anyway, he had this nice diagram. I kind of ripped it off. If he yells at me, I won't be surprised. Nevertheless, you kind of get the idea. I mean, you've got your DCC controller over here in the corner, and your wires going to your bus line. Your bus line is going around the layout. This bus line could just as well have started here, gone all the way around the outside, and come over here. The question I get asked a lot on DC and DCC is if I put a wire around the layout to feed something from, or say in DC, a circuit or a bus wire like this around to feed lighting on your layout, do I have to bring it back to the point of origin? And the answer to that is no. Whether you're running lighting through it or you're running a DCC signal through it, whatever you're doing, no, you do not have to join these two ends and bring it all the way and make a full circle. If you had breaks in this, or you had some kind of physical connections in your bus line, it may be wise to make that circle complete, but to make it actually function, you do not have to connect those leads. It can be strictly starting and going out, does not have to come back. You can see in this diagram that he's showing his feeders every so often. He doesn't give any measurements on here, but it makes sense to just see that you do it anywhere between switches, anywhere in this segment here between switches. This is a double main line, by the way. whatever, you need to have your diagram on paper so you can see where your blocks are and where it makes sense to put the feeders. Now let's talk a little bit about how far apart to put feeders. That's a topic of conversation quite often. Okay, gang, there's a website out there, and it's by a gentleman called Alan, his name is Alan Gartner, and he has a website that's called Wiring for DCC. Very, very informative, and I'm going to put a screenshot to it here. I have a piece of paper with it on there, but I'm going to give you a screenshot to it here on the video. It's just cram-packed with anything you'd want to know about DCC. Anyway, let's get back to the wire spacing. Here's a guideline that came from his site. I don't know if you'll be able to read it all. You don't need to. I'm going to read it to you anyway. But it's just a recommended, I guess it's a agreed standard, you might say. I don't know. There really isn't a standard per se. But let me just read what it says. And I'm not a guru, even though I worked in the phone industry for a long time. I'm not a guru on voltage loss over wire sizes and all that stuff. That can all be looked up if you choose to do that on the internet. However, I'll give you my rule of thumb that I use shortly. On this chart, for N scale or Z scale, it's saying that if you have 1 to 20 feet of bus wire, that bus wire can be 16 gauge. If it's 21 to 40 feet, it should be 14 gauge, and if it's over 40 feet, they're recommending 12 gauge. I don't know what the gauge wire is we have at the fairgrounds on our 1,000 feet out there, but it's pretty hefty. It also makes mention in here that you can go too big. I don't understand that concept, but apparently with the DCC signal, you can. But nevertheless, it appears to me that on most home layouts, everybody's home layout, you're probably good with 16 gauge or 14 gauge. I had some access to some unusual wire that most of you can't get access to. It was a phone company type wire, and I'll show it to you under here in a little bit. But anyways, I don't know what gauge it is. However, 16 gauge wire, of course, you can pick that up at Lowe's or Home Depot or any place you choose to get 16 gauge wire. And I think that would be sufficient for a bus wire. And we've already discussed that doesn't have to come all the way back around. So that's what he's recommending, or that's what his page recommends for a bus wire size for different lengths. Now, he also recommends here feeders, and he's talking 18 to 22 gauge for a feeder that's no longer than 5 feet. Most of my drops down here are probably less than 12 inches, and I use 24 gauge. I think obviously the shorter you make those drops, the less large the size of gauge wire has to be. I find that the 24 gauge is sufficient for very short lengths, and that's what we use at the fairground as well. Now, they don't give any information on this particular page that I'm looking at on how far apart your feeders should be. What it does say on several of them that I've looked at is never rely on rail joiners to carry your signal for any distance. I don't find that to necessarily be true. There are guys that are going to buck all of this. But nevertheless, at the fairgrounds, we're using Alcato Unitrack, which, as you know, every 9 or 10 inches we have a joint. We have 1,000 feet of track. We have a feeder about every 10 feet. You know, that varies depending on if you have a couple of turnouts in there and you need to add an extra feeder or whatever. But my rule of thumb is on our layout out there was every 10 feet, and it seems to work. We have no problem running anything we want to run, sound, nothing. We don't have any. We've had 2 instances where we've had to solder joiners together. I think I've mentioned that in previous videos where the joiner was manhandled during the placement of the track and therefore probably didn't make good contact. So instead of taking that piece of track out, we just went ahead and soldered that joint after the fact. That works. Here at home, I have a feeder maybe every 4 or 5 feet because the layout is relatively small. I think a lot of these places recommend one every 3 feet, and one of the pages I looked at recommended in every section of track that has a joint on each end. Now, I think that that's way overkill. I think you have to have some faith in the joiners. The rail joiners have worked with DC for years, and I realize the concept is different. However, I have not found rail joiners to pose any issue on small home layouts, transmitting the DCC signal or anything getting lost. So there again, it's all, you can read all kinds of information about it, but these are just my opinions. I think now at this point, we'll dive under the layout here and just take a look and show you how my bus looks after I had DC on here. Took all my blocks and basically soldered them to the bus. The important thing that was on that diagram there is that your inner rail or outer rail, whichever way you look at it around your layout, that the left hand or right hand rail, no matter how you're looking at it, has to be continuous all the way around. Not continuous, what am I trying to say? My brain's not working too good. But what I'm saying is you have to have the same side of your bus attached to the same rail all the way around the layout. If you reverse one, say you have 15 wires around there and you reverse one of those, you're going to have a dead short and you're going to chase it forever and you're going to have to start pulling off wires. How do I know this? It's the Pfeiffer brain. I screwed up underneath here and reversed one. Actually, it was reversed on the table. I had the colors right underneath and it was reversed on the table, and I already had all my scenery and everything done. So it took me a while to chase that down. I had to keep lifting them off my bus until I found where the problem was. But I eventually got it straightened out. So, like I say, always make sure you get the same wire, same rail on the same side of the bus. And now let's go under there and take a look and see what's up besides spider webs. Okay guys, we're not going to spend a lot of time under here looking at this, but you can see that twisted wire, and that brings me to another point. Most of these websites that I went to look about bus wires recommended twisting that wire. The reason for that is that even though there's insulation on those wires, there is a certain amount of bleed that escapes from that copper wire as that signal travels down the bus, or any wire for that matter. And if you twist it, it reduces the amount of interference between the two sides of the wire. So anyway, I recommend, and they recommend, a twisted, when you get your bus wire, twisting it. I know a lot of guys don't, and they don't have any issues, but that's just my recommendation and their recommendation. Now you can see all the white-blue feeder wires, Kato feeder wires there. And what I do is I just strip each side of the bus and attach the feeder wires to the appropriate side of the bus, as I had mentioned earlier. You notice that there's a little piece of Velcro tape over there on the side. That just holds all the wires taut. You can see that I've screwed the wires up to the bottom of the homosote, which we're not even going to go there. And basically that's it. Anywhere that your bus goes, you just need to tie the feeders onto it. It's pretty simple, basic deal. You can see I have quite a few here. This is where my yard is on the front of the layout. You can see, ouch, that's called bumping your head on the bottom of the layout, which I'm sure is not new to anybody. There's some feeders on the bottom track going up to the helix, or going up around the helix, and then you can see that they come back here and they tie into another location where I've stripped the wire. On that bus wire, you can see there that I have, there are not two different colors on that bus wire. However, there is a ridge and writing on one side of that bus wire. That's how I differentiated the two sides. But you can see anywhere I needed to tie a bus, I just strip it. And I strip them about 2 inches apart, and I don't even bother putting electrical tape or anything on it. I'm not a big fan of suitcase connectors myself, but I know guys use them with success. So use whatever method you like. And you can see that my bus wire, it just goes way on down there and around to the other corner. So let's get out from under here. My neck hurts. Okay, guys. So I really don't know what else to tell you here about that. One thing I would like to say, and I get unfortunately, I mean, fortunately for me that I make money on it, but unfortunately, I don't want to make money on somebody for having a misfortune of burning up a locomotive truck, really. I have burnt up several here before I got wise, and there's a lot of manufacturers of components. Let me back up slightly. Every DCC system out there has a circuit breaker built into it. Now, the problem is that circuit breaker sensitive enough to break the circuit when a locomotive runs onto a switch that's flipped the wrong way? Maybe, maybe not. I get an awful lot of locomotives. Guys call me and say, I have a melted truck on this locomotive, can you replace it? And of course I do, and I can in some cases, and I've done it here myself. But what I have found out is you're better off to buy an aftermarket. First of all, you got to test the track and make sure it does break. Okay, your system does break, and I'll show you that in just a second. But an aftermarket circuit breaker of some kind will save you dollars, lots of dollars in locomotives and misfortune down the road. A lot of these systems breakers, and even some of the aftermarket breakers for that matter, they try to reset too fast. They break the circuit, okay, when the locomotive runs on there, creates a short, but then they automatically turn around and try and reset. Then they break, then it breaks, then they reset and break and reset and break and reset and break. Well, if that locomotive sits there for 5 minutes or 3 minutes or whatever, it may even be 2 minutes or 1 minute, and that thing keeps trying to reset. Every time that thing resets, it boom, it hits it with that power, hits it with that power, hits it with that power. Eventually, whether it's breaking the circuit or not, that axle is going to get hot, and that side frame is going to melt, and that axle is going to melt, and then the locomotive's not going to run, and you'll be calling someone, or you'll be ordering a truck from Cato if they have one, or whoever the locomotive manufacturer is. So my recommendation is an aftermarket circuit breaker of some type. I have a DCC Specialties one on here that has a capability of having a green LED or a red LED, and I'll show it to you here in a second. But I would recommend something like that inline to your bus, out of the DCC system to the aftermarket breaker to the bus. It'll just save you a lot of headaches down the road. And I don't care whose manufacturer you use. It's just having it in there is beneficial. Let me show you that to you real quick, and then we'll get on with the rest of the video. Okay, guys. Like I said, testing to see if your system does accept a short is recommended in almost everybody's book. Because we're in my garage and I don't have any coins in my pocket, we're going to use a trusty socket here. We're going to take this socket and we're going to set it here on the track. Let me see if I can get you in there. We're going to just set it on the track there, creating a short. And the reason I know it's short is all my headlights on my locomotives have gone out. But let's take a look down here. And here we are. Here's my light blinking again. Okay, guys, this is my DCC Specialties circuit breaker. You can see here that this wire over here, whoops, wait a minute. This wire over here comes out of my DCC system. This one on this side goes to the bus. It's that simple. These two wires here come out and are really cobbled up together right now, but they used to go through a little wiring harness here, and you can see that the green light is on right now. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to try and pull out something here and see if I can short the track. I had these mounted in my control panel, and while this doesn't make any noise, I wish it had a buzzer on it, because there's times that you're not looking at the panel yet you have a short circuit. You can see there that I have a blinking red light attached to it now that's relatively large. I'm still trying to figure out how to put a buzzer on there, and I'm not very smart, so I haven't come up with a buzzer yet, but I would like to have something audible to tell me I have a short circuit. I take that off, and you can see that my green light comes back on. And that's kind of a neat feature if you have a control panel, because it tells you when you've got something going on the track, and it's saved me a lot of headache and hassle. You can also see that I have a lot of trashy looking wiring hanging underneath there, but that's a whole nother subject down the road. But anyway, that's the circuit breaker I use. Anyway, that's basically the gist of it. Other than what I was going to tell you is, if I didn't have this board in here, my system here, the track power would go off right here. Everybody's system is a little bit different, but you would see a short in some fashion. Something would either go off, something would turn off, something would change color, or something to let you know that there was a short. I don't know if I can create a short on my box by shorting these two pins right here. I'm going to give it a shot. Okay guys, I was telling you to test your system with a coin on the track or something. I can't do that because I already have my DCC protection board up here, and it kills the circuit before it gets to my unit. But this is what you would see if you put a coin on your track on a DCC, Digitrax DCC system. This is an Empire builder. If you shorted the track out, you can see that the track power status light goes off. You can hear that the system made noise. Then it tried to reset, and it went back off. Then you heard the beeping, the 3 beeps again, and there you go. That would tell you that your system is accepting a short and is working in the proper manner. However, you can see, like I said, that it tries to reset, and if that reset is too close together, you can still melt a side frame. So anyway, but just be sure it works. That's the key thing. Okay, Glenn, the other thing you asked was a programming track, and we're just going to briefly cover that because I've covered it before. But on a programming track, what I would recommend is, if your system has a set of contacts or a set of pins on it for a programming track, and most of the Digitrax do, and I don't know about the other manufacturers. I think there's a couple that don't include them on their unit. I think NCE does not include them on their unit. You have to buy a auto switch, I believe it's called, to switch when you do the select programming on the handheld. That's what I'm trying to spit out of this mouth. But anyways, by all means, what I recommend is, in my recommendation, this is not a steadfast thing. In my recommendation, I prefer having a program track that's away from my main layout. Not necessarily away from the layout, but not connected to the running portion of the layout. I had one on here that was part of the running portion with a flip switch on it, so I could select program and not program. But there was times that I forgot to flip it, and the locomotive wouldn't program, drove me crazy. Anyways, I just recommend having a separate programming track somewhere, especially if you're going to hook a computer to it and use the JMRI software, which we're not going to go into here. But you can create a programming track on the layout with a switch to select running on the layout or running as your program track, and it could be a siding anywhere. It's very simple, just an isolated piece of track. So we're not going to go any further with that, but that's the object of that. And I'm going to post some links for you guys and to these two websites. One of them is Ellen Gardner's website, and the other one is called DCC Wiki. And there's an awful lot of information there. I think a lot of it's overkill, but it's certainly useful if you have specific questions about wire sizes and what happens, why twist the wires, why do all of this stuff. There's information on both of those sites. So anyway, I'm going to put them on here somewhere in this video, and I hope to see you guys down the road, and I hope you guys find this video helpful, and we'll talk to you later.
Amount due 74.